Welcome to Sleepy Classic Tales. Today we're telling On the Water by Guy de Maupassant, published in the year 1876. A man who loves the river like nothing else in the world tells of a single night on the water, a night in which the most familiar place of his life became something strange. Make yourself comfortable, breathe calmly, and let yourself be carried to the bank of the Seine on a warm summer evening. Last summer I had rented a little country house on the Seine, a few miles from Paris, and slept there every night. After a few days I made the acquaintance of a neighbor, a man between 30 and 40, who was one of the most peculiar characters I have ever met. He was an old boatman, as they say on the river, one obsessed with the water, always by the river, always on the river, always in the river. He must have been born in a boat, and he would probably die in one too, at the last stroke of the oar. One evening, as we sat on the bank and watched the Seine, I asked him to tell me something of his life on the river. Then the man changed. He grew animated, eloquent, almost a poet, for he carried in himself a great passion, this consuming, irresistible passion for the river. "Ah," he said, "what memories I have of this stream you see flowing there so quietly. You city people do not know what the river is, but listen to how a fisherman speaks the word. For him it is the mysterious thing, the deep, the unknown, the land of illusions and apparitions, where at night one sees things that are not, where one hears sounds one does not know, where one trembles without cause as though walking through a graveyard. And indeed, it is the gloomiest of all graveyards, one in which the dead have no grave. The land is bounded for the fisherman, but the river, on moonless nights, it is boundless. A sailor does not feel the same for the sea. The sea is often hard and cruel, certainly, but it cries out, it howls, it fights openly. The river is silent and treacherous. It does not rumble. It only flows on, always, soundlessly. And this eternal, quiet flowing is more dreadful to me than the highest waves of the ocean. Dreamers claim that the sea hides in its bosom immeasurable blue lands where the drowned roll among the great fish. The river has only black depths in which one rots in the mud. And yet, when it gleams in the morning light and laps softly against its reed-covered banks, it is beautiful. But let us leave that, he said then, and looked in silence at the water for a while. You wanted a memory? Good. I will tell you a single experience, the strangest that has befallen me here, not 10 minutes from this spot. I lived at that time, he began, as I do today, in old Lafond's house, and my best friend, Louis Bernet, who has since forsworn the water and gone into an office, lived in the village below, 2 miles downstream. We ate together every day, sometimes at his place, sometimes at mine, and I rode the way there and back in the evening, in every kind of weather. I had a boat in those days, such as I have never owned since, heavy, broad, safe, a faithful animal of a boat. Well, one night in July, as I came from Louis and rode home, the world was as beautiful as it can be. The moon was full. The river lay like molten silver. The air was mild and without a breath. This calm seduced me. I thought, to smoke a pipe here, that would be just the thing now. No sooner thought than done. I reached for the anchor and cast it out in the middle of the river. The boat swung back with the current until the chain drew taut and then stood still. I settled myself astern on my sheepskin as comfortably as I could and lit my pipe. Not a sound around me. Only now and then, barely audible, a soft lapping of the water at the bank. And when I looked, I made out the tall clumps of reeds there in strange shapes that sometimes seemed to stir. The river was perfectly calm, but the extraordinary stillness moved me. All the animals were silent. The frogs were silent. The whole world held its breath. Only once, far off, a toad cried its tinny, mournful note into the night. I smoked and watched the smoke stand in the moonlight. And with that, I do not know how, something crept over me. The boat lay still, but it seemed to me that this stillness was too great, that something within it was waiting. I scolded myself for a fool and resolved to set off. The mood was spoiled for me, without my being able to say by what. I pulled on the chain, the boat came into motion, glided a stretch against the current, and then I felt resistance. I pulled harder. The anchor did not come. It had caught on the bottom, on something down there, and would not come loose. I began to tug with all my strength. Nothing. I rowed the boat downstream to change the angle of the anchor. Nothing. It held fast. I sat down and thought over my situation. To tear the chain was not to be thought of. It was heavy and new, and my knife was no match for such a thing. Swim? The bank was not far. But to give up the boat, my good boat, in the middle of the river? No. So there remained only to wait. Sooner or later a fisherman would come by, or the anchor would give of itself. It was a mild night. I had tobacco. I even had a bottle of rum in the locker. I laughed at myself, made myself comfortable again, and resolved to take the thing as an involuntary night's lodging. I did not suspect what the night had in store for me. So I smoked my second pipe and looked at the sky, and I was just beginning to find a cozy side to the thing when a change occurred all around me, so quiet that I first noticed its effect and then its cause. The moon still shone, but its light grew dimmer, as though frosted glass were being pushed before it. And when I looked over the side of the boat, I understood. From the water, fog was rising. It did not come drifting from afar. It grew out of the river itself, out of its whole surface at once, first like a breath, then in swaths, and within a few minutes there stood around my boat a mist that grew thicker and rose higher until it towered over me. It was as though the river were wrapping itself in a cloth. And what a cloth! I have never seen such a fog again. It stood as high as a man over the water, dazzling white in the moonlight, like a wall of cotton wool. And above it, when I raised my head, the sky was still there, clear and full of stars. The moon shone down on the surface of this sea of fog and made it gleam like snow. But I sat beneath it, in the white, and saw nothing more. Not the bank, not the water, not the end of my boat. The world was gone. There was only I, the piece of planking beneath me, and all around this glowing, insubstantial brightness that swallowed everything. And now began that for which I am ashamed to this day, and for which no one who has not experienced it himself would have any right to be ashamed. With the fog, a strange feeling came over me, which at first I did not recognize because I did not know it. Fear. Not worry, not unease. Fear. Bodily, in the temples, in the stomach, in the hands. I recited to myself what was to be recited. You are 200 paces from the bank. You swim like a dog. It is July. The water is warm. Nothing can happen to you. It did not help. For the dreadful thing was not the danger. There was no danger. The dreadful thing was that I saw nothing and heard everything. The fog took the eyes and sharpened the ears, and the ears began to work. There was a gurgling at the boat that I had heard 1,000 times and that now sounded as though something were feeling along the hull. There was a rustling from the bank where the reeds stood. Or did reeds still stand there? Was the bank still where I knew it to be? Direction itself dissolved in the white. And then, somewhere behind me or before me, I could no longer tell which, came a sound at which I started as though I had been touched. A splash. A heavy body going into the water. A fish, I told myself. It was a fish. But my hands had closed around the rowing bench, and I sat without moving and listened into the white with a tension that hurt. How long I sat like that, I do not know. Time had vanished with the world. In fog, there are no hours. I tried to occupy myself. That is the only remedy. I knocked out my pipe and refilled it, but my fingers trembled so that the tobacco fell out of my hand. And at the third match, I gave it up, for the little light only made the wall around me denser and blinded me to whatever might be behind it. Then I reached for the rum. I drank a swallow and a second, and for a while I grew warmer and lighter, and I even laughed softly at myself. But it was a laugh I listened to myself, and it sounded false in all that white, and I quickly let it be. And then came the images. That is the work of fear. It fetches what it needs. There came to my mind everything I had ever heard in the way of river stories, from fishermen and old women, all the stuff I laughed at by day. The tales of the drowned who swim up at night, of voices from the water, of hands that reach for oars. And all at once a thought stood in my head, clear and cold, as though someone had laid it there. That my anchor down below hung not on a stone and not on an old wreck. That down there, in the 20, 30 feet of black water beneath my planks, something lay on which it had caught, and that this something was now connected to me through the taut chain, all night already, as on a cord from which two hang. I know how that sounds. By day, on the bank, in company, it sounds ridiculous. But I sat alone in a white nothing over a black depth, and the thought sat with me. And it went away no more. I tore at the chain, suddenly, wildly, with both hands, so that the boat bucked. The anchor did not stir, and the jerk propagated itself down the chain to that on which it hung, and the notion that my tugging moved something down there, nudged it, woke it, made me let go of the chain as though it were hot. I sat down in the middle of the boat, away from both ends, my arms around my knees, and tried to breathe, slowly, counting as one teaches children. And around me stood the fog and glowed, and beneath me stood the water and was silent, and in me the heart beat up into my throat. So the deep night found me, a grown man, a waterman of 20 summers, crouched in his own boat 200 paces from the bank, trembling at nothing but the river he loved and a chain that led downward. And then, in the midst of this eternity, the fog lifted. Not slowly, the river drew away its cloth as it had thrown it over in minutes. All at once, I saw again The water, black and glossy, the banks with their trees, the whole wide, still river in the moonlight. And I breathed a sigh of relief, that you may believe. The world was back, direction was back. There lay the bank, there the other. My boat lay in the middle between them, as in broad day. But the relief lasted shorter than it should have. For now I saw, yes, but what I saw was no longer the river I knew. The moon by now stood low, the light fell long and slanting over the water, and the trees on the bank stood black and without a stir, and their shadows reached far into the stream like dark arms. Nothing moved. Nowhere. Not a leaf, not a blade, not a breath of wind, and the river itself flowed so smoothly that it seemed to stand still. It was the world, but it was the world without life in it, a world of silver and ink, beautiful and dead. And I sat in its midst as the only living thing far and wide, or as the only thing that took itself for such. The cold came on top of it. The night chill had sunk onto the water with the falling fog. My clothes were damp, and I was cold now, a cold that came along from within. I tried it again with reason, and reason did what it does in such hours. It talked, and no one listened to it. I even sang. I began to sing, loudly, some rowing song, to hear a voice. But my voice ran off over the still water and came back to me strange from the banks, and I fell silent after a few bars. For it was worse with singing than without. Once I thought I heard, far off, a wagon, wheels on a country road, the most ordinary sound in the world, and I listened for it like a man dying of thirst. Then it was gone, and the stillness closed again, denser than before. And the whole time, beneath everything, lay the chain. I saw it again now, in the moonlight, how it ran taut from the bow into the water and vanished there, a straight, tensed line down into the black, and I forced myself not to look, and yet looked again and again. What holds you fast, I thought. What holds you so fast all night? I would have given much in the world to close my eyes and sleep, and I did not dare. Not out of fear of a danger, I knew there was none. Out of fear of the waking, of opening my eyes and seeing something. So passed the rest of that night, in a waking that was no longer a waking, and a waiting without object, while the moon sank lower and the shadows of the trees reached longer over the water, until they nearly reached my boat. At last, after hours, the first thing this night did for me happened in the sky. It turned gray. At first, I only sensed it, a slackening of the blackness over the trees in the east. Then it became certainty, and I sat in my damp boat and watched the dawn like a prisoner, the key in the lock. It went slowly, agonizingly, slowly, but it went. The gray grew pale, the pale grew white. The stars went out one after another, and the world got its colors back, first the cold ones, then the warm. From the bank the first birds woke, a sign that the earth was inhabited again, and with the light everything of the night fell from me like wet leaves. I was already ashamed. I sat there, stiff and chilled through, and was already beginning to arrange the night as one tells it to a friend, as a droll tale, as the foolish adventure of a man who had let himself be fooled by the fog. And then I heard it. Strokes of oars. Real, wooden, wonderful strokes of oars upstream, and out of the morning haze came a skiff with 2 fishermen on their way to their nets. I called, they came alongside, and I told them my mishap, Only the mishap. Of the night in between, I said nothing. A fast anchor, a stupid spot, a lost night. So it sounded by day, and the two laughed good-naturedly and laid their skiff beside mine. Then the three of us pulled. 3 men, 2 boats as counterweight, the chain taut as a string, and the anchor gave. I felt it through my hands, a loosening down there, a heavy, reluctant yielding, and then the chain came, hand over hand, and it came heavy, much heavier than an anchor weighs. The fishermen noticed it too. The elder said there was bottom stuff hanging on it, old wood probably. That happened. We pulled on, evenly, and I looked at the water at the side of the boat where the chain rose, link by link, hung with mud. And then the water grew troubled there, and something dark rose up beneath the surface, slowly, turning with the chain, an outline that grew and took shape. The anchor pierced the surface first, crusted and dripping, and in its arms, caught by the clothes in its iron arms, embraced by it as by a last embrace, hung that on which I had lain at anchor the whole night. It was an old woman. She came out of the water with the anchor, her clothes heavy and black from the river, her gray hair loosened and long, and around her neck lay a cord, and on the cord hung a great stone. The fishermen beside me grew still, and their brown faces lost their color, and the elder crossed himself. The 3 of us lifted her into their skiff, carefully as one beds a sleeper, and none of us spoke a word as we did it. She had been in the water a long time, even my young eyes saw that, many days probably, and the whole long night through, every hour, every minute, while I sat above her and trembled and told myself there was nothing down there. She had been down there, 2 fathoms beneath my planks, with the stone at her neck that she had tied on herself, and my anchor had caught in her clothes and held her, and she had held me, the whole night, the 2 of us moored to each other, the living woman above the dead one. One learned later who she was, an old woman from a village upstream, poor, alone, weary of life. The authorities did their part, the fishermen took her away, and I rowed my boat home that morning, tied it to the ring, went into the house, and slept until the afternoon. So, said the old boatman, that was the story. He knocked out his pipe and looked at the river which drifted by in the last evening light, calm and gleaming as on that night. I asked him whether he had ever thought, afterward, of giving up the water. Then he looked at me as though I had said something incomprehensible. "Give it up," he said. "Why? The river did me no harm. It only let me know for one night what it is, that I told you at the beginning, the deep, still unknown over which we travel. We know of everything only the surface, sir, of the river, of the night, of ourselves. That night I once looked beneath it. That is all. The fear I had back then, you see, that is the strange thing. It was right. I was afraid of something that was really there. I only did not yet know it." He stood up, wished me a good evening, and went down to his boat, for he wanted, as every evening, to go out on the water once more. I watched him as he cast off and rowed with quiet strokes into the dusk, a shadow growing smaller on the silver stream. A man and his river, who knew each other. And it seemed to me, as he vanished, that he had spoken the truth. One can fear a thing and love it nonetheless, one's whole life long. Perhaps one even loves it for that very reason, because one has once, a single time, seen down to its bottom. That was our short retelling of On the Water by Guy de Maupassant. A man, a night, a river, and the discovery that fear is not always an error, and that love outlasts it nonetheless. Beneath every still surface lies a depth, and we go out onto it all the same, every day. And that is perhaps the quietest courage there is. Good night, and if you like, we'll hear each other again tomorrow at Sleepy Classic Tales.